Today on Sky Notes, we're talking about the light and the darkness, the solstice, and the many traditions around the world that honor this same turning point. Different names, different rituals, at the same moment when the light returns, hope enters, and we remember that cycles always shift. So let's go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome.
Hello. So I'm excited about what we're talking about for a million reasons. This is so Lillian came up with this brilliant idea to talk about solstice and all of the other traditions that overlap at this time of year. And we haven't even compared notes and talked about
Right.
anything because she knew what she wanted to talk about. But I said, I'm going to go out and find all of the different celebrations around this time of year. And it is a very robust list. And there's really no Northern Hemisphere culture that doesn't celebrate something at this time of year. And it goes way farther back than anything that we do now. So let's talk about this, Lillian.
Yeah. Do you want to start with solstice or do you want to hear my rap about Advent?
Well, I mean, so we have solstice coming up on Sunday.
21st.
Yeah. And this is, in astrology, we're moving into Capricorn from Sagittarius.
Right. That's right.
It's always the cardinal signs that mark a change of season because it's a change, and it's the cardinal signs that do that, right? So by agricultural definition, this is a time for everything going in and resting and sleeping. But by practicality, it has a lot more to do with sunlight. So let's talk about Advent and its birth and how it connects to solstice.
Yeah, I really appreciate you grounding it in the astrology because I do think that that's the primary driver. But there were a few things as I kind of dove in to the information I could find on Advent. And then full disclosure, I'm going to be celebrating Christmas this year and I'm going to be celebrating solstice. And of the two, I think solstice is the one I prepare for more, which is interesting, right? So taking it back to the Sagittarius Capricorn arc, when I went to go look at it, the information I had tracked it back to around the middle of the 3rd century. It was mentioned in the Council of the Saragossa, and I can't remember, I think it was 382 maybe, but if it's important to folks, I'll go get that data. It began as, and I was describing this to you before we started the cameras, this notion of, let me break down the word Advent. Sorry. Let me see if I did that for us. Advent means, it's from the term Adventus, and it means to celebrate the arrival of God. And they had two different ways to look at it because they were deriving the meaning from the Greek word parousia, Parousia, and that ultimately, when they debated it, was a moment of preparation for the coming, and that would kind of take the notion of it always being a dual observation of the fact that Jesus had been on the planet, and then the other fact that Jesus was coming back for these folks of faith who were celebrating. And as Christianity became more popular, these feasts became more popular. They actually wanted folks to come together, and they found the other meaning of parousia, which is face-to-face fellowship. And as I was reading, I was kind of filtering through type A white folk spiritualism, right? Which can have roots in paganism or all over the place, and indigenous cultures talking about walking through the years. And then the experiences I've had with our Turkish brothers and sisters while looking into the words that rhyme. And we had a sheikh, and that sheikh, when he talked about Ramadan, which is the feastless a holiday where in Islam, you forego food for the day and then you come together with everyone at night and begin eating. And you can eat until dawn, and then you go through the day without food. And we were, I think, in Hawaii or something discussing this. And so there were smells and you could almost taste what you were going to have for lunch and, coffee on the air kind of thing. And we were like, how can you do this? And he said, oh, because in Turkey, the bakers shut down, the restaurants shut down. We're all doing it together. And so it is a thing of us coming together to eat. It is a moment of sharing. And when I heard fasting described as penance, I thought, is it though, or is it practice? And so, what a generous thing as a community to knit together these experiences where you're creating this sense of anticipation, right? There isn't a deluge of stuff. We're not going to eat
Right.
today. And so, when I thought about this topic, what I was thinking about was I see all over the web these advent calendar openings. I don't know if you've seen them, but
Oh, yeah.
I I'm I got an advent calendar and I was done with that calendar in an hour. I don't know if you've ever done an advent calendar, but they do have multiple days on them, and many people with much more earth and probably air than I would just let it roll and let it happen. But the point there was I wanted to get under it to see what was going on. And so while I think about the fall as a time of ubiquitous harvest, because things are ripe that won't be here in the winter, and things are ready to eat now that won't be prepared in the way that you can enjoy them later. But this Sagittarius ebullience, right? Like I see where it turned into a gift, but I also thought how kind of Capricorn to kind of go, and then we're going to do it in this order because that way we'll be ready to receive this beautiful spiritual experience that when you dig into the origin of the words starts to look like how do we anticipate together, and then how do we come together in fellowship, and what does that look like? And I love the idea of the rowdiness of the Sagittarius giving way to the organization and just frankly better party throwing abilities than many another sign of Capricorn.
Yeah.
But that was my wrap.
And so I'm curious about like when did the calendar start? Because I mean they weren't all, I mean I grew up Catholic. We had an advent calendar every year, December 1st. It's the thing we looked forward to. Ours had chocolate in it. I thought that's all you ever put in an advent calendar because
Right?
when it's just part of your upbringing, it's like it's chocolate. And we were policed, like you were not allowed to ever open the next day. So,
Right.
that was pretty strict in our house. But
Yeah.
so did you in your research, did you find out like so when did the calendar start and how did they
So
start out?
that was right. So that was another part of it. And I'm hoping you mean calendar, like what time of year are you supposed to start? Because there were two different ones.
Oh, okay,
And
cool. Well, we just mean advent calendar. So whatever that looks like.
perfect, perfect. So there was one that starts on the 17th, and that was part of the origin, I think, with on the other side of it, Melanie Reinhardt does an annual gathering of folks to observe the 12 days. And I think it concludes at Epiphany. And Epiphany was a very popular Catholic celebration. So they were trying to connect the dots there. And, so that's that answer. Then it started on November 30th, and there was a 4-week run, which with each Sunday being hope and joy and peace and another symbolic meaning to orient. I also looked at a 24-day calendar that described the orientation from an extremely Catholic point of view, where, having all of the material things means nothing. And then the next day you explore how with Jesus in your heart, it means you have purpose, right? And so within that context, you can see it. But it is funny because I find in the East, when there's hardship, the community articulates the support. Oh, we're going to help each other. And in the West, when there's hardship, we get policed, and there's this whole, I don't know, hyper emphasis on material things. And I'm speaking only from like this body's lived experience. But that ability to understand process, even from like a somatic standpoint, like how my body understands process, would benefit from these rituals, minus the intense judgment, right? Like I would rather figure out, it's super hard enough, right? To figure out how to throw a party, enjoy all of our friends, go home, not gossip, and go to bed. Like I haven't been able to pull it off, and I'm old. So I love that kind of tug of war. And then with regard to like when it showed up, they wanted us to do it for 40 days, really about
Oh,
like,
40
what's it
days.
going to take almost like to get through this Sagittarius hoo-ha, like, where's the wine? You know what I mean? Where I know we had cakes. Did you guys make enough cakes for me?
Yeah. Well, and it's look at like there's so many celebrations and so many different religions or
Yes.
practices, but they all
Yes.
come down to the exact same thing. It's all in the northern hemisphere, it's all about the returning of the light. And so it's
Yes.
interesting how, and so solstice came first. It became, and like so many things that we practice or that we put mystical meaning into or anything like that, all comes back to primitive people watching light change and the cycles and the differences in the seasons,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I always joke about eclipse time, how if you were this in a primitive world with no electricity and all of a sudden your light just vanished, of course it would be mystical. Like if you did not understand the mechanism of what was happening. And so similarly with, the whole year and how, there's no understanding as to why this is happening, but we're going to celebrate that these days are about to stop getting shorter. The cold is going to start getting warmer. And, so that shift into optimism is what
Yeah.
it seems like, and into brightness and more
To keep
abundance. And
the fires burning, to keep the heart warm. Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting because with so many practices, like the candle is part of every ceremony. That light is part of
Yeah.
every ceremony. And so that is so
Yeah.
like we're in the middle of Hanukkah now. And
Yes.
they light a candle every day.
Absolutely. Well, it's the expression of joy that enough oil was available for this population for one night, and it stretched out to 8, and that was enough to get them
Right.
to the next thing.
Thank you for reminding me.
Us,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just fascinating to me, but that juxtaposition, like you're talking about with Sagittarius Capricorn, I always joke how we're conditioned to like get all excited through that Sag season and all that celebrating and everything. But then just a few days before Christmas, we start regretting how much money we've spent. And we start regretting how much we've drank and ate, which is
So
that
you can
Capricorn
see.
modulation. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I mean, I don't know if you experienced this, but no one's monitoring me. I
Mm,
I don't I have yet to find like a you who can support what I'm doing. And fair. Let's say I've had that happen in multiple occasions throughout my life where people have seen who I am and they know what I'm up to, and they're like, "Hey there, that looks crazy. Don't do that." And I'm like, "What? What was that?" And I manage to listen, right? And so there's sort of this net that happens. And to expand on your notion of the world without electricity, don't you know? Um, and that in the northern hemisphere, away from the equator, it gets colder. And there is a need to prepare and moderate and enjoy and moderate and enjoy and then celebrate that the spring comes. And you can't skip January, February. You know what I mean? You can't skip the times where it feels difficult. So I love the notion of how we prepare each other, right? And that all of these rituals are about that. And it's not to disparage people's beliefs, but we are entertaining these notions to share these ideas. The idea of fasting is so interesting to me. And lately, the way that I've translated it to a more modern idea, I have been thinking about it as, oh gosh, desire is information, or it doesn't have to manifest for you to be a successful person. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the way that I experience my desires is that they're very confusing, even if they're loud and say things in a way that seems articulate. And so I usually have to go through a process before I figure out if it has any relevance for me. So I'll give you a few examples. Am I picking up something from someone else? Their strong desire, right? And I don't know that I'm picking that up. Am I picking up something from the past? And as an astrologer, we have the luxury of knowing that if you're relating really intensely to someone, they could have been your killer, mom, your baby, your pet guinea pig, or your lover. We often make a beeline for let's pick the most intimate one, you know. Anyway, all of that to say that notion of finding the ways to prepare, I find endlessly soothing, you know, and because desires don't have to be manifest, and I usually say desires not manifest destiny, because I'm trying to kind of be clear about something where I'm saying, if you don't get that thing, maybe you're learning something else and you're still going to come away with something really powerful. And so it's not a matter of like fixating on what our desire is, right? And I think about that expanded situation, no electricity, you have to save your food, you would have had to have prepared it. From this Sagittarius's point of view, oh, get away from me unless I get my own little whatever cubby to can things. And then I can come in at midnight and leave at 4 a.m. And, you know, you've written down the instructions so that I can leave you notes, and that's it. That's all I want. And that's not super communal, but yeah, I guess I do feel like the connections that I make over this part of the year really do have to be weighted with kindness, even though I can be so mean on Facebook with my chiding. It's from like my heart, you know?
Well, but I mean, if you think to just about the astrology of this time of year, and even like
Right.
as you're talking, and I'm thinking about this cycle that we go through every time of, this time of year, when we move, Sagittarius is so much about ideologies and beliefs and
Yes.
practices, right? It's
Mhm.
that energy. And so the beginning of the season is all about that, right?
Yes.
And then it becomes more about, and I think people forget this often about Capricorn, but it's on the same axis as Cancer, and it's a really
Right.
nostalgic sign. And
Oh, I
it's
love that.
very attached to family often.
Yeah.
And so the fact that
Yeah.
we go through this ritual and the ideology and the Sagittarius celebration, and it's big, and it's, to those of us, to some of us, it's exhausting. And it comes with lots of pomp and circumstance. And that's all so Sagittarius. And then all of a sudden it's like, but now we're going to hunker down and spend this with
Right.
family, and we're going to preserve, and we're going to have like all of the sales are in Capricorn season,
Right.
which is just the
That's so
frugality and the
wise. That is so wise.
practicality, of that. And so, I mean, the transition itself is so fascinating to watch. We were going to talk about the other different celebrations that
Well, I think if we start, I might bring something in, but I want to hear what you found.
okay, so we've got Diwali, which is a festival
Mhm.
of lights,
Yeah.
which is, Buddhist, Hindi, Sikh.
Mhm.
And then Yalda,
Uh-huh.
celebration of the longest night, Iranian Persian tradition.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say this right, and I apologize. Dongji is
Mhm.
Chinese or East Asian, is the solstice festival, the balance of yin and yang, darkness increases and then stops. So that's interesting. And
Right,
then Incan Southern Hemisphere, of course, is going to be different. This is a renewal, it's a
right.
gratitude. Solstice celebration is tied to the sun god and, the thanking of that. But across cultures, how do we survive the dark? How do we mark this time when things feel stalled? What do we do with ourselves? I mean, you think this is a time of survival. This is not a
Right.
time of building and abundance. This is preservation,
Yeah.
reserving, that energy.
Yes.
Um, and so I just find that fascinating. Like we like to differentiate ourselves so much. And especially at this time, there's so much
Mhm.
separation and division. And it's like, but we are really all celebrating the same damn thing. We're all like, and I came to this on my own. I did not realize how important that December 21st was to me living in the Great White North. I was very dark and very cold. And so this December 21st and the fact that it's actually everything is going to get longer is really important to our psyche. Oh,
Yes.
there you
Sorry
go.
about that.
Hi. She took a little magic break.
Well, you said
Um,
dark, right?
Yeah, it's so, so dark. And so I think even just psychologically, there's an importance to this where we need to have something to look forward to as everything is getting so dark.
I
You know?
agree. I agree. And for somebody who does solstice, I don't know if I shared with you, but one of my experiences was living in the same community with Starhawk, who teaches permaculture and was developed the Reclaiming Collective with a lot of other contemporary pagan, non-hierarchical, feminist, gotta have chocolate in the utopia kind of people. And as part of that, we got to do rituals. And the solstice ritual was at a nude beach. And it was the first time I hung out with like 60-year-olds and 50-year-olds and kids and all ages naked. And it was in December in San Francisco. So that is
Wow.
not necessarily the warmest climate. And so what I remember is there was this moment where we were going to go express what we needed to express to keep the wheel of the year moving, right? Because the idea was if we didn't, maybe it wouldn't get started again, or maybe our connection to it was part of that,
Interesting.
starting it. And what I remember is going into the water and like, ah, why does everything suck? It wasn't a polite and tidy, here's a present. Oh my gosh, your dress looks perfect, kind of experience. It was very raw. And then we got dried off and sat in front of bonfires and did a big spiral dance ritual and left nourished and ready to kind of hold that until what comes on February 2nd, Beltane. I don't know if you got that one, but that one, our friend said something so beautiful. Lee said something about how we tell stories at that ritual and they're from the heart because it's Bridget, right? And it's designed to help us get through the winter, the hardest part of the winter. So it expanding on what you were saying about when times are hard, this kind of kindness becomes fundamental and life-giving, right? And the beauty you can bring about in that environment really fundamentally changes it with fellowship.
Here, I have a timeline. That's
Oh,
what I
I'd
want
love to
to
hear it.
share.
Yeah.
Okay, so the long arc, um, so winter solstice came first. This is prehistory. This is
Oh, I love this.
pre-writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get Bronze Age, Iron Age is Yule, so Germanic and Norse. And of course, they're as far north as I am, pretty
Mhm.
much. So they would definitely feel the same way. Fire, feasting, evergreens to represent that permanence. Surviving winter equals victory. There's these kind of themes. And then also at the same time, Yalda night, it's called, which is Persian Iranian, longest night, candles, poetry. Again, that gathering, that coming together, that
Yeah.
community piece, which is so important. And then we get to 200 BCE, classical period, Hanukkah,
Nice.
Judaism. Originates 2nd century BCE, ritualized light. Again, protecting tradition, identity, and the practice under threat. So that's interesting because now we're moving in a bit of a different direction with that. And then we get early Christianity, Advent, 4th century BC onward. And it seems like it took a little bit of time for them to agree to what Advent was going to look like.
Yeah.
It was slow. And it was
Well,
literally waiting for Christmas and the slow growing of the light.
and it has that dual nature, right? If somebody says, I want to celebrate Christmas
Right.
because I want to celebrate the coming of the savior of the world,
Yeah.
I don't want to get in front of them and go, don't do that. But if somebody says, I want to celebrate Christmas because we've celebrated it every year and this is the one, I might like go, what is wrong with you? But like you can feel that tension. And even in
Right.
what you were saying about the yin yang, I went on a retreat once around January 2nd, and we were deeply in the yin period. And so our quest was to allow that to sit, right? And I would almost want to ask Andy about this. What is fasting a remedy for? What is the community component of it, right? Because it keeps coming up as not necessarily, I mean, you can find like the Buddhas and the folks who are fasting on their own, but this is very specifically, and I like how it's modeled in Islam, fasting during the day, gathering at night. But the one that I was thinking about is fasting for many days would take people out of that celebratory space and allow them to feel that yin, that deep yin, right? Like disability does, like grief does. These things that we want to guard ourselves against are actually mechanisms to really get us deeper into ourselves and then therefore more compassionately outside of ourselves, able to behave in ways that are really constructive. And so that deep yin, she asked if we would put our phones away. And I think at that time I was really, I did not want to. And I put it away for like 48 hours or something like that. And we were hanging out in yurts and we were doing all of the, cool body movements and the whole experience, because it was about waiting in the yin until I could feel that little spark of yang. That was a big deal,
Wow.
So I wonder if that's not part of it, right? Because I think about, we're right now in this really weird circumstance, almost like the Tower of Babel, right? We can reach each other. One of my favorite astrologers posts all the time in Turkish, and I read them in the translation, and I'm like, whoa, this is amazing, and I'm grateful for that. But that notion of coming together and agreeing, I don't know. I just wonder about that because Advent comes with that duality, right? That tension
Right.
of that duality. And then even that yin yang comes with that duality that could
Right.
mean be yin,
Right.
wait for the yang, or we know you're not going to be able to not be yang, Sagittarius. Know that yin is coming for you. The credit card receipts, the
Right.
indigestion, the winter cold, the all of the things that then put you in that yin place. It feels like sometimes we collaborate to get ahead of that.
So for Christmas it's the last one. Christmas is the last one of all of these. It's the newest. And
What
there's
about
lots of
Epiphany?
arguments to say that it would hang on, that to say that like it's 500 to 1500, like that's how long it took people to actually kind of come together to what Christmas was going to be,
Got it.
And considering like his Jesus, it really isn't supposed to have been born for quite a while now. December 25th ain't the date. Sorry to burst anybody's bubble. But it took a while for them to settle on what Christmas was gonna be and all of that.
So that's part of
Um,
Epiphany, right? Like
I
January 6th
I
is
think so, yeah, yeah.
birth in Greek.
Um, but we I for so it when I did my research and I came back to ChatGPT to get it to organize the timeline for me,
Yeah.
it threw Diwali in the end. And Diwali, Dangji, and there's an Incan Anti-Rami,
Mm,
all are as like the solstice. They are pre-written history.
right.
So they actually come along far earlier than any of the things that we're talking about. And I just wanted to make sure that I got that out there that this, North America or Europe, we aren't the first to be doing this. And the whole world was doing this in one way or another. South, they were celebrating the bright light, and North, we were celebrating the returning of the light.
I always want to go back to what the words mean. What is the concrete reality we are talking about, right? And what is the underlying, mm, dude, I don't even know how to say it. Like, what is the behavior we're expected to conduct ourselves with, right? And so, what I have learned, and some of it's so reactive because I'm in a really materialistic culture with a lot of stuff. And, you know, I always kind of default to this, but I'll just say there are some folks who want gifts in quantity. There are some folks who want just money. And I think in the United States, I wish I had healthcare and a house, stable housing and a good job and that sort of thing. And, I get it. And one person does not a government subsidizing agency make. But some folks are in that space where they're, I don't know, coming to the peak of their religious experience. Like, I love that you said that you did Advent. I was raised Catholic, and our Christmas was always, Sunday school, Sunday school, Sunday school, the Mass on Christmas Eve, midnight Mass. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I get to dress up and go to midnight Mass, and here's a story. I'm ready. And, it was, I mean, I always really bought like I don't know, the more modest parts of it, and we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have gifts. And even if we did, I mean, I definitely think there's a Terry Pratchett thing that talks about the detached retina and the third eye. And I definitely think I have that with regard to receiving, because it takes me a long time to be like, that's so beautiful.
So should we talk about the solstice chart? Let's
I
talk
remember
about
what I was going to say. And yes, we
it. You
should.
say it. You say
Just
it.
to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So gifts are not always the thing we think they are. And in this point in time, it may be better to focus on fellowship. And then if stuff comes up and you've got a gift or you're obliged in some way, knock your socks off. But to let the gifts come up, or to let that fellowship come up in place of a material thing, I think is a real opportunity that we're getting from the data we dove into.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I have to say I've aged a lot in the past 3 years. And in terms of
Sure.
my priorities have
Yes.
aged a lot in the last 3 years. And I used to get so excited about gifts and even,
Yeah.
whether it was buying them, giving them, receiving them, just very, I mean, and that's just how our Christmases were.
Yeah.
But we know, when you need things as a young adult, it's
Yes.
exciting, it's even more exciting and it facilitates something quite different. But, now I'm surrounded by people who have everything they need for the most part, so I'd rather do charity things and make sure that people who don't have what they need have stuff.
Yeah.
And the gift giving is just it's lost so much of its luster. Um, and so I'm in a really weird place when it comes to this holiday. And so I'm kind of sad I didn't do something adventy leading up.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I feel like there's a new magic to that, and especially now that we've taken a little bit of a look of what it's supposed to be about. I feel like there can be some really potent medicine in that, in getting ready for the season in a really different way. And I mean, if people don't know this, I was a hairstylist for a really, really long time. So this season is very different for anybody working in retail or in
Gosh.
services.
Yeah.
Like it does eventually lose a lot of its magic because you're working your absolute hardest with people who are super stressed out.
Hmm.
That was my actually most exciting thing about stopping doing that, was this time of year,
Yeah.
in wedding season. But yet to be able to sort of reappreciate it from a totally
Oh,
different
yeah.
point of view, right?
Yeah.
Um,
You were talking about gifts, right?
yeah,
And
and
that's and as you were talking about gifts, I thought about the yin portion of
right,
gifts, right? And that you
right.
wouldn't necessarily give gifts. You would share what you would share to help people survive, whether
Yeah,
it's, honey on the lips of fasting Buddha or rice paste or whatever it is, right? And,
yes.
when I was talking before about desire, what I keep running into, that kind of dampens my celebration is expectation. And like I was saying, so much stuff is coming in non-verbally right now that I can't necessarily mm, isolate it,
Yeah,
pinpoint it,
yeah.
right?
And I mean, I think it's a public service for us to mention at this time, like, we don't have any air
Right,
other than Pluto. And thank goodness we've got some Capricorn happening. I've never been so
right.
excited to have some Capricorn come in to get some Earth, because we were super ungrounded and unlogical for an entire month of like nothing kind of taking us out of the water, fire, passion, emotion, right? So
Oh, yeah.
anybody.
So here's even though I don't appear like this was me all last month. What
Mhm.
in the dickens?
And anybody who doesn't realize how they pick up other people's emotions are really overwhelmed at this point in
Yeah.
time, so wise of you to understand that you're picking up other people's desires and other people's stresses and other people's, anticipation and all of it. Because anybody who's sensitive right now is 100% doing that. And like I said, we are, as the sun moves into Capricorn, and we're having this new moon in Capricorn, I think people are going to feel quite different than they have felt for the past month.
Oh, it's
And I'm not going to say not necessarily in a good way, because not everybody loves being grounded.
well, I that is totally fair, but
Yeah,
grounding right now, as we know, would be part of the launch pad into the next coming years. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I do remember what I was saying, that
Yeah.
looking at this time of year from more of an anticipatory, um, religious, not religious, but from the soul level,
That anticipation of the light, right? And
Yeah.
there is one that started on the 17th, and so I think if you wanted to fashion an advent, you still could, and
Makes
to
sense.
me, I love it. I have family that was born in mid-January, and there's something about, like, these isolated holidays, right?
Mm,
You gotta nail the date, and then you can stop thinking about it. Like,
right.
we don't do that with our birthdays, we've never done I think there was one anniversary that I wanted to do something about, and my poor husband was like, "Who are you?"
What are you doing?
No, yeah,
Well, and I was thinking
new
about you
seasons. Yeah,
and your Sag sun,
yeah,
and because I'm always really intrigued by this whole, like, we're all on different cycles, right?
yes.
And so both my siblings are January babies.
Mhm.
And so, feeling ripped off because it's January, but it's not only from their perspective, it's not just that it's after Christmas. And so people are like, in lower energy and whatever,
And it's not
but
gonna be
it's,
all the people, right?
but also for them, they're at Christmas and leading up to their birthdays, they're at the balsamic end of their year. So they're at a very different place
Yeah.
in terms of energetically, their solar cycle is winding down. And so that's a very different vibe. And so for
Yeah.
you, you're just on the upswing being a December baby. You're just at the beginning of your
I
year.
don't
So
wanna say it's the perfect time?
yeah, and I mean, I'm more at like the gibbous, so this is good for me too, because I myself
Yeah,
am at a
yeah.
in a growing phase. So
Yeah.
But not, anybody who is going to have a birthday in that January, February, March
Yeah.
pocket is winding down. And so this time of year can be pretty draining for anybody who has to be winding down
So
now.
if I can reflect back what I'm hearing,
Cool.
because the cycle of an individual's chart includes those phasal connections, we're describing the period before the birthday as a balsamic period, which is like the barren period for a garden. There may be little seeds under the ground, like going, I wish I were up top, but the soil's keeping them safe. And it's not necessarily a time to party.
No,
And
it's
so
like an
they
inward.
feel
Yeah.
like partying.
Yeah, it's an inward. And so the amount of energy that needs to get expelled at Christmas might take more out of them than it would for somebody who's not in that quieter downslope.
Well, and that's part of what I was getting to with the gift thing and how
Okay.
hard it is to give gifts. Like I got really good advice from a friend around kid gifts, which is they're never about you. And so right now I'm thinking about these things like what does help, what does feel good? What are the things that actually land that aren't about like me satisfying my ego, on top
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's another thing that's interesting about the Sagittarius Capricorn shift because one is like just by if we're just talking about the sign itself, Sag is more connected to the sun, so it's going to have that hotter, more ego attached energy, whereas Capricorn doesn't. So there's that interesting shift that kind of happens not quite in time for Christmas. Do you know what I mean? Like there's this
Yeah.
weird, it's a little bit too late. And so gift giving can be extremely about the person giving it instead of the person getting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Are you ready to talk about the solstice part
Please.
now?
Yes.
Okay.
There we
So
are.
I did it for Ottawa
Yeah.
because then it's my country, your time zone. And it's really not that different than the Washington one because
Can I
they're not
say,
that far apart.
this is a perfect example of desire not needing to manifest. Of course, I'd love us all to be in the same time zone, but I kind of love that I can work with anyone around the world.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you see the sun here is at 0 Capricorn, and
Yeah.
then the moon has not gotten very far. So we're very fresh into this new moon in
Mhm.
Capricorn. But yet still that moon's in a dark place in the chart. So there is some quietness to this chart. There's some spiritual energy to this chart. I don't know how else to put it with
Mhm.
where that moon is sitting and with this darkness.
Mhm.
Um, And then the other thing that catches me is that other than Pluto, the other three planets are doing their last little dance. So we have Saturn at 25 Pisces, Neptune's at 29 Pisces, Uranus is down here at 28 Taurus. And so even though we've got some freshness here in this chart, we're finished. This is a finishing
Wow.
phase until everything. I think, doesn't Uranus finally land itself into Gemini in June?
I thought it was April.
You
but
could be totally right. I'm going to figure it out. But
yeah.
we are closing up. And I think people, I don't know, what have you been sensing? I think people are kind of tired of trying to wrap shit up.
Well, I like that you say that. So to me, it feels more like, the image I get is polar bears on the floating glacier chunks and people kind of making their way like, oh shit, I got to get back to the land or, oh, here's my house over here. So it feels more chaotic than that, which could be, again, I don't want to hype on it, but if we were meant to relax more, right? Like if we were done with our harvest, done with preparation, and we were all meant to kind of be more inward, we're not in a society in the West where that's accommodated. And so it could just be that discordant energy that I'm feeling. But I definitely feel profound impatience to get to the next elements because personally, I feel the the extreme sensitivity I have emotionally sort of softening, and allowing more room. And it doesn't feel like that's a skill I'm learning. It feels like that's the liftoff we're going to get from having fire and air, right?
Right.
That's going to be
Right.
fun.
And
But
oh no, go ahead.
well, to your point, look at that. North Node in Pisces intercepted with the last gasp of that Saturn. And if it is in the first house,
Yeah.
it's telling us to grow the fuck up. And if it is with Neptune, it's saying, guess what? Half of the stuff you believe isn't worth your time to believe in it. And guess what? Like I was joking, oh gosh, I hope this is okay and makes it through logically. I was doing these drawings, right? Because I'm a Sagittarius and I was trying to figure out where I was going and I'm making all these strides. And so I let my ego have this space on my sketchbook and it drew me on a pedestal, right? And underneath I wrote, beware of the pedestal. And I asked myself, why beware? And then I saw 4 or 5 other pedestals like broken in the distance where I had learned what I was supposed to learn. And then life comes by and teaches you something else. And that's not a grief filled thing. That's how you mature. Right. And so I am able to accept those changes like a bonsai plant accepts them. And so what I see in this last gasp of the Saturn and the Neptune is, to me, I think it's no secret. I see that connection as deeply materially magical, powerful, able to pull stuff up. But the problem is if you haven't aligned yourself with your own subconscious, you're going to get nightmare fuel and the worst stuff and other people's stuff. And you won't be able to like clearly attune yourself to alignment with what is maturation. What does it mean to be part of community as a mature person? And so I think Saturn is saying that. And so to touch into some of my pet peeves, I guess, the COVID stuff, right? What would it be like if we approached an illness without trying to think it away? And maybe it's not too late to look at that. Or conversely, if money is an issue from nation to nation, what would it look like to approach different financial structures? My favorite right now is it the Netherlands? Or I can't remember. There's one country that put aside billions of dollars from their oil wealth to accommodate. It might be
Norway.
That's it. Norway. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think about in this chart? So if you can't see the chart, the sun is coming up to Mars in Capricorn. Mars loves to be in Capricorn. That's its exalted sign. And I know I saw all over the internet, as soon as Mars went into Capricorn, everybody's like, I have not been this productive in 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Which is, because that's a really industrious place for Mars.
Well, and I think Robert Blaschke would say that it requires ongoing effort. Like unlike other exaltations, the exaltation here is earned because if you've got Mars in Capricorn, you have a fire under your butt, and that isn't something everyone's Mars has.
When we're looking at it from more of a mundane sort of point of view, that's it's conflict anyways, but in terms of looking at it from that point of view, the sun is coming up to some kind of conflict.
Yeah.
With the Mars there. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
I think more of that Sagittarius Venus, that's kind of the hoot, because I do see the sun, like I said, like asking for that maturity, right? And then even if it's conflict in the effort to organize things to function, to be productive.
Yeah.
And that Sagittarius is like, no,
Yeah.
I want to party. I want to go places. Where are my friends? How are we going to do this? Can it be fun? Yes. And if the Mars is ripe in that Capricorn, they'll give that Sagittarian plenty to do. You're picking up the artists, You're staying away from the people who will organize quietly and calmly. You can go get the food. You know what I mean? Like they can fashion something that will satisfy that Venus. But again, on a more mundane level, it is that tension between, are we getting ready for something or are we doing something right now?
Right. Well, and to me, when you look at the stuff that's all at the end of its cycle and getting ready to start a new one, and I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Neptune and Saturn aren't just changing signs, they're starting over in the zodiac. So
Yeah.
this particular switch is a little bit bigger than it would be in, any other transition. And so there's this is an initiatory chart with that new moon, but at the same time, there are still some chapters that need to get closed if we want to move forward in a more clean way. What I thought was really interesting about this chart is that all of those planets, or a lot of the planets, are sitting up in that fourth quadrant.
Mhm.
So there's a real collective
Yes.
feeling here, very kind of social. And I love, like, the Venus and Sag is fun. The
Yeah.
Mercury and Sag up at the top, a lot of foot and mouth problems,
This is what I was gonna say with the
yeah.
preparation. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Actually,
laughed yesterday. I posted on Facebook that I need a speed bump between my brain and my mouth, and that to me is very Mercury and Sag, you know?
I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But also good storytellers.
absolutely.
And I tend to think that Sagittarians that are, I don't know, I've heard from someone else, they require prayer before they party because they are ultimately priests. And if they
Mm,
don't pray before they party, they're going to be criminals.
interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm. And the other thing, and then with the Saturn in the first house, there's an emphasis on personal responsibility in whatever this story is. And so being able to self-reflect and see how you are contributing to whatever situation it is that you're looking at, I think is another really big part of this chart. But what I find interesting, and I want your thoughts on this, is that the moon, it's going to oppose that the retrograde Jupiter. And
Mhm.
we talked about a little bit the Capricorn being on that axis with family. And
Yeah.
so what do you think about that opposition with the Capricorn moon and the Jupiter in Cancer?
Um, so as I think about this in the context of, this weekend, right? I think the 12th house is the one where karma shows up, right? It could be your resolved karma and you're just part of this scene. And so you don't have to be wounded by it. But because of that opposition that you're talking about, and then the dun 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 conjunction with the Pluto, it seems to me, and I've heard this a lot about next year, but this is the first time I've seen it and thought, oh boy, we better do it this year, is be conservative, not necessarily in your, I don't know, political leanings. But what I'm saying is, like you were saying about a speed bump, if you've got spiritual protectors or friends or people who can give you feedback, that's one way to do it. But just that knowledge that yin is especially around your mouth and that less is more. And while I may not be abiding by that, Tracy may not be abiding by that, I'm going to try it to keep me from being mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I just liked it. To me, there was an element of, make sure that if you're spending time with family, that you're also getting time to rest.
Yeah. Oh,
With
that's good.
with that, right? With that Cancer, where I get that from is Cancer, often family, but the moon in the 12th needs quiet. And so the secret to this season is to make sure that you are honoring the rest that you need.
That's
Um,
really helpful.
and practicing. I mean, we're finishing off the Saturn in Pisces, which is learning. Part of it was learning to say no and setting up boundaries. So I feel like that's a big part of this story too. Like, when do you put yourself first and when do you crumple to the pressure, whether it's,
And
social or family or whatever.
that's where I feel like it's really hard to get accuracy, right? Because of that Neptune. And Neptune, I think with the Saturn there, you're going to find out some things that you thought were your motivations that aren't really grounded. And that's where I think like the delusion can come up, because it's about letting things fall away that aren't useful for you. And so those things might be, oh crap, I've been making the same pot roast for 20 years and no one likes this pot roast. I'm not going to make this. I'm just going to enjoy my time, right? Or these little course corrections, or the ones you put in your books for next year. Next year, I'm going to try it like this,
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, can you believe we came to the end of the hour?
It's
Look at
beautiful.
that. It's amazing.
It makes me want to sign up to commit to the light, to show up for the light.
I like it. Well, everybody, we are not here next week. We're taking the day off to enjoy the holiday season and take a
Yep.
rest. And
Yeah.
we'll be back at January 2nd, and we're going to pull some cards for each zodiac sign and talk about the upcoming year. So thank you. I cannot believe it is going to be 2026 right away. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Unbelievable.
And thanks to everybody who comes and hangs out with us. It is
Really
a
appreciate it. Yeah.
pleasure. All right. So we'll see y'all next year. Bye, my friend.